Today is the 21st day after Pentecost.
Hello, Church School families. Today's Godly Place story is the story of the great family, the story about Abraham and Sarah. I hope you enjoy. Let's begin. This story takes place in the desert. We can't get the whole desert in our classroom, so here's just a little piece of the desert. The desert is a dangerous place. It is always moving, so it is hard to know where you are. There is no water, so you get thirsty and can die if no water is found. Nothing grows there. There is nothing to eat. In the daytime, it is hot. And in the night, it is very cold. When the wind blows, the sand hurts you when it hits your skin. The desert is a dangerous place. People do not go there unless they have to. When the flood was over, the creatures went out in all of the 4 directions of the earth to fill it up with life again. Animals and people would gather near water. There were 2 great rivers in that place. In the city of Ur, the people believed that there were many gods. There were gods for everything, every tree, every rock, every flower. The sky, the clouds, the water, even the dogs and cats had their own gods. But there was one family that did not believe that. They believed that there was one great God over everything. They did not yet know that, but that is what they believed. Their names were Abram and Sarai. The time came for this family and many families to go to a new city. They were not sure that God would be there, but they thought so. They went north with their flocks of sheep, their donkeys, and all their children. They slept in their tents at night, and during the day they walked along the great river called the Euphrates. Eventually, they came to the city of Haran. They stopped and made a new home there. Life was good, but sometimes Abram would go out to the edge of the desert. And look off into the distance. Something was missing. Abram and Sarai were growing old and they still did not have any children. But even more was missing than that. Then God came close to Abram, and Abram came close to God, and he knew that God was telling him something new to do. He knew that God was telling he and Sarai to go to a new land. Abram and Sarai did what God had asked them to do. They went into the desert to the west of Haran and walked towards Canaan. They went with all their sheep, their tents, and many helpers. Most of the family had stayed at Haran and watched them go. Finally, they came to a place called Shechem. Abram prayed to God, and God was there. So Abram built an altar to mark the place where God was. And then they went on. Next, they came to a place called Bethel. God was in that place too. God was in that place, and so Abram built an altar there as well. God was not just where they were used to. God was in this new place too. God was everywhere. Abram and Sarai went on. This was not the place they were meant to be. Eventually, they came to Hebron by the oaks of Mamre. Abram and Sarai now had a new home, and they stayed there, but they still had no children, and they were growing too old to have a baby. But one day, Abram came very close to God, and God came close to him. And he knew what God wanted him to do. God said, "You will have as many children and grandchildren as the dust on earth, as the grains of sand in the desert." One day, 3 strangers came out of the wilderness. Abram was sitting by his tent among the trees of Mamre, and he invited them in and gave them food and drink, as was the custom in that day. They told Abram that he and Sarai would have a son, and Abram laughed. Sarai was standing by the tent, and she laughed too when she heard. They were now much too old. The 3 strangers went on their way and disappeared. Later, after all of those years of waiting, Abram and Sarai had a son. They laughed. And because they laughed, they named their son Isaac, which meant laughter in their language. That also was when Abram's name was changed to Abraham, because he would be the father of many. And Sarai's name was changed to Sarah, because she would be the mother of many. The boy grew, and Sarah grew old, and eventually she died. Abraham and Isaac buried her under the oaks of Mamre. They missed Sarah. They had been married so many years. And even though Isaac was growing into a fine young man, Abraham was sad, but he knew that he had one more thing to do before he died. He needed to find Isaac a wife. So he sent his most trusted helper back north to Haran to find a wife for Isaac. Abraham's helper stopped by a well, and there he found Rebekah. She had a lot of courage and kindness. She offered to give him and his animals something to drink, and she then invited him into her home. He told her and her family about Abraham and Sarah and the great family that was coming. He told them about Isaac. Would Rebekah come and help that great family be? She said yes, and her family let her go to marry Isaac. When Isaac saw her coming, he came out to meet her. Eventually, they were married. Then, old Abraham breathed his last. Isaac and Rebekah buried him under the oaks of Mamre, next to Sarah. Isaac and Rebekah had children, and those children had children, and they had children. And this went on for thousands of years, until your grandmothers and grandfathers had children. And then your mother and father had you. The family did go on and become as many as the stars in the sky and the grains of sand in the desert. Now I wonder what part of this story was your favorite. I wonder if there's a part of this story that we could leave out and still have everything we need. I wonder if you see yourself in this story. I hope you have a wonderful week and that you remember that you are part of the great family, created by God for a purpose. Stay well. Bye.